Hey everyone, welcome to another Hygraph live stream. Now, you might notice it's not just me this week. That's because, well, we have a very special episode. Instead of watching me live code, maybe getting bored as I make mistakes and debug things along the way, we've got some of the best and brightest minds from the Hygraph team here to talk a little bit about how Hygraph uses Hygraph. Now, we've had an ongoing blog series that we're going to post in the chat, but we figured it might be nice to get everyone on stream together, chat through all the different pieces and how they fit together and how really our website ticks and how we use Hygraph in production to make everything work. But before we can talk about the tech, let's talk about the people that are joining me here today. We've got Özgür and Pratibha, the original architects of our front-end system. Pratibha is our amazing designer, and Özgür was the original developer behind our front end. Özgür now works in the Hygraph studio and the design system there. And that leads me, of course, to Gabriel, who is our new front-end developer for the website. He took over that code base from Özgür, and I think there's a lot of cool things we'll discuss today for that. Whew, talking too fast. And we've got our two amazing marketers with us as well. Jing is our content marketing manager, making sure that all of our amazing stories on our website and social media kind of connect up. And we have Angie, who's our field marketer, who does a ton of amazing things, including making sure that these streams run well behind the scenes. So I'm going to bring us to a more equal setting here. And I want us to talk a little bit about not just the website as it stands today, but the fact that we did do a redesign in 2022. We finished that up in 2023. And I joined the company further along in that process. So I don't have a lot of the context. So I wanted to start with Özgür, you and Pratibha, and talk a little bit about how that project started, and also what were the primary factors that drove to those decisions?
Sure, I could start. Hello, everyone, firstly. So some of you might not know, but Hygraph used to be Graph CMS until July 11, 2022. And I joined the company just a week before that. So I was also greeted with the big news that, hey, you're the new brand designer. And in a week, the company is going to be rebranded, which was actually... Personally, it was a great time for me to have joined the company because that meant I could start a lot of things from scratch, and there was a lot of rebranding efforts, and the homepage had already been designed and we were just waiting for it to go live, which also meant that everything else on the website had also to be updated. Because we had some new messaging, some new visual guidelines, but because at that time we just wanted to release the new homepage and go out with the new messaging, we just did that. And then it was on us as the designer and the developer team to make sure the rest of the website is also aligned. So that is how the conversation about building a design system started, because we wanted to see if it's feasible to release things part by part, as to like, say, a product page one day, a headless CMS page one day, or we go like an all-in effort that we create a design system, which is a common thing for product teams, but not so much for marketing teams, because it's also a big overhead. Because for the next 9 months, Özgür and I were occupied just on this project, and some other things had to be compromised as well. So that's how the conversation started. And then Özgür came in towards the more technical side. So we tried to convince the other stakeholders as well. And I think he can also talk more about that now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, rewrites are generally difficult, we all know that. So you at the beginning you think everything's going to be easy, but then when you are building it, you face a lot of details here and there that you didn't really foresee at the beginning. For us, it was kind of like inevitable to do this rewrite for several reasons. First of all, it was built with an very early version of Hygraph, which wasn't, and we weren't really using all the potential of the Hygraph, like the components. The second reason was the code base was a little bit bloated. It was really difficult to scale and deliver new pages as quickly as we wanted. in marketing teams, it's really very important to deliver those pages, especially landing pages and so on, so quickly. And another thing also Prativa mentioned a little bit is that, well, I mean, she mentioned that we went through a rebranding phase. And during that rebranding, some new styles, new colors, etc., was introduced. And there was not really a good connection between the code and design that was connecting everything together nicely. So there was a lot of inconsistencies in the website design. And eventually it looked like a very viable option for us to rebuild it from scratch. And I think the main thing was to build it in a way that it's really modular. And maybe I show you, like Pratika said, this is actually what I showed at the beginning. And this also helps everyone to understand what we are talking about. So from a designer perspective, most of the websites have a common structure, right? They are basically sections stacked on top of each other. So generally you have a hero section, then you maybe have a feature section with an image on the right, text on the left, and maybe you have a mirrored version of it where the image is on the left. And generally you have a logo cloud, a card grid, etc., etc. And you can obviously make a lot of different variants of it, like this feature section with the image and text swap. And the hero can be a vertical layout like this, or can be horizontal, or a very simple one. So these are what we call blocks, basically. So we wanted to build our website based on these blocks on the modular pages, basically. And then, of course, you have some other pages where you need a specific template, like a blog page. It has a special template, right? Or maybe a resource page, which has a specific template, and a case study page, and so on. So we are focusing on these modular pages. And for the designer, once you design all these, these blocks, then you can actually really quickly draft a page, right? So maybe you start with a hero, that's your new page, let's assume, and then you want to add maybe a feature section to it. So you just pull it and drop it here. Okay, so it's the wrong one, sorry. This is the
live wireframing. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, still the wrong one. So maybe you have a logo cloud, you pull the logo cloud and put it in your design like this. And then maybe you want to have a card grid. All right, let's put this thing here as well. And then maybe you want to finish it with a callout box at the bottom. So you just pull the block component and put it. So you basically have a page, right? So it can be longer. You can add some feature sections, etc. But that's the basic idea. So everything is a block. And that's from the designer perspective. And from the developer perspective, it's also very easy. Like this is a hero. It has a layout. It can be horizontal or vertical. It has a title, right? And a description, an image, and some buttons here, which we call CTA. And so as you can see, it's following exactly the same pattern here. And the other person in the equation is the content editor. And for the content editor, it's the same thing. In Hygraph, you can basically, using the components, you can, just like the designer, put all these sections on top of each other, like stack them on top of each other and create the whole page just by following the design. So for the content editor, it's the same things. Like you have a hero component, it has a title, it's a description, and so on, just like the one here. So as you can see here, like these three things, designer, developer, and the content editor, now talks exactly the same language, right? So it's nothing different. They when they say the hero, it's the hero component everywhere. When they say logo cloud, it's the logo cloud everywhere, etc. And they all have the same properties.
Nice.
And yeah, and of course, if you look at these components, it has a text here. There's a button here, and maybe this could have been a form. Then you would have a text box, a text area, a select, maybe a combo box, etc. So if you break it down, you go down to the primitive components. So you need to then first build the components, then bring them together, make blocks, and so on and so on. So actually, we didn't really invent this. This is called the design system. And we really benefit from this right now. I guess this talk, we're going to be talking about more about what we built here in this modular approach.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue to talk a little bit about, before we move into maybe the content side of things, maybe Pratibha, you could walk us through a little bit on the idea of how does the design system change and influence how you're able to get more designs out there faster? Maybe go into a little bit more detail on that.
Right. Yeah, sure. So when we started, it was basically Oscar and I listed down all the pages we had on the website. There were like more than 200 pages, so it did freak us out in the beginning. But eventually what we did was we divided the pages in two categories. One is your templatized pages, which is more like a blog page, an event page, a resource center or something, which always look similar. They have a similar structure, like there will be a hero, an image, the main blog content, a call to action, or however you want it. And then there will be the modular pages, which are more like landing pages, or when you want to promote a feature or something very specific, like even a home page. So we divided these, and we had to sort of dig down, like what are these primitive components. So I can actually show some of these things and how it's built. So as you can see on my Figma, we started with the foundational elements, which was more like the fonts and the icons that we need and the colors that we want, and then we sort of added on some of these elements in different configurations to create some basic components, like say a button or the breadcrumbs that go on the blog, or how the avatars would look, or how the alert components would look like. And then we combine all of these things to create something like blocks. And this is where it gets interesting, because these are like the building blocks that Oscar was showing earlier, and then you can, for example, just drag it out, and you have all these different properties. So you can pick if you want left alignment or center, if you want the media or not. And the good part is that this is the exact same language that is also spoken inside the code and inside the CMS. So a content editor, so say, for example, a product marketing manager wants to build a new landing page for a new feature launch, and they can just come on Figma and they can build a page like that on their own by just dragging and dropping and changing all these things. Or even if they don't, if I have to build a page like that, and then they can, because they don't interact with the code directly, that is something we have built midway to make sure that the design and the CMS directly translate. So like these people, the editors can just go on the CMS and they can pick the exact same properties, make sure it's center, it's label plus description, and whatever is toggled on, they make sure it's toggled on there as well. They swap the images and they see the exact same output that we have on Figma as is on the preview link. So that made things so much faster for modular pages, because earlier we had to custom create every single page and make sure the colors match, make sure the fonts match. And that was a tedious process. And it also takes away a lot of consistency. But now you don't, like, we take away a lot of the guesswork, and people who don't even know too much about the design and the code, they can still create the results as we would like them to. So that helps us a lot. But then this is the scalability front, but also we have to keep in mind the flexibility, because this can potentially also create situations where there are some rigid structures. So like every page might start looking similar, And for that also we had some solutions. So here and there, like blog pages, all of them look the same, but still, for example, Jing has the flexibility that if she wants to include like an author tip in the middle, or if she wants a quote or some recommended reading, these are not necessary, but obviously you can add these to spice up the content as well and to make the reading more effective and smoother. So we also try to make sure like all the pieces work together, which is the essence of a design system, is that nothing is very isolated. They all should be blending in with each other. And that's why, like, I mean, these guys can talk more as well because they are the ones who are editing and releasing the final pages. But I'm sure this has improved the speed and flexibility as well a lot in the last 1 year since we launched it.
Yeah. So before we kind of dive into the editing side, I'm kind of curious as a follow up here. When we're talking about like overall page design, obviously this takes care of that, right? We don't have to worry about new blocks or anything like that. But when we're designing little components to go inside of it, not like code components or design components, but maybe a new image that goes in a spot or a graphic or an animation, does having a design system change the way you design those elements, or do you design those elements separate and then plop it in place when it's ready?
Right. So this is why it was also personally it was beneficial that I joined the company at the time where we had to do everything from scratch. So I had a lot of flexibility to make sure like everything was working well with each other. And at that time, I was the only designer taking care of many things. Now, thankfully, we have comparatively more resources, so we can spread things out. But at that time, I also created a mini design system, which is not something most people do, but I created a system that takes care of all the social media assets. So basically, Angie can just go and say that I want a new event asset, I want to promote a new event, and she can just drag one thing out, change the text, change the image, exactly how we create the website, and it will be ready in less than 5 minutes. But this is also a time when we had to decide, because with a design system, I'm not saying this is not possible, but sometimes you might need to pick if you want better quality or faster speed, because they do go hand in hand sometimes, but sometimes they might also not. Because, for example, we have the HR team who wants to announce new joiners or some important announcements every now and then, but it's not feasible for one designer to create everything custom every single week while we also have this huge website to take care of. So we created such templates where they can swap the flag of the country where the new joiner is from. They can change the image easily, they can change the color. So everything was also built like a system, which made things so much faster. And it's the same process also with the illustrations, though now we are also going towards a bit custom route where we have identified a few pages or few assets which are high value. So over there, we put in a lot more effort, and we we try to make sure that the system is helping us but not blocking us in any way.
Nice. So I'm going to apologize to our panel here real fast, and I'm going to take us away from the order that we talked about before, because it's feeling like a good way of transitioning here. And I want to talk a little bit, Angie and Jing. I want the two of you to talk a little bit about how this componentized system, this page builder system, has worked for the two of you in creating the new pages that you have to worry about for our content, for our events, etc.
Yeah, I could also start.
Nice.
For the event pages, I mean, we didn't have an event template before. We had a content model that you could publish the events just as a simple entry in the event section. And so we needed a new page template. I got together with Pradeepa and Gabriel to figure out all the fields and components that we needed to add for that, such as a longer description, a slug, a form like a HubSpot form ID, SEO, event tags, improve like the dates. So there were quite a few things. But once that event template page was finalized, now it takes me just like 5 minutes to publish a new event page. And I do that weekly, at least weekly for the weekly live streams. And it takes just like around 5 minutes, and it's published. Super quick, super easy, very intuitive to use as well. I know what every field and component does. So it's just, yeah, it's a matter of seconds to clone that page.
Yeah. And I think I can go a bit more into the context of how it used to be and so on, because I also joined around the time, like, July 2022. So templates are not a new concept to us. Like even in the old project, we had templates. However, that was built a long time ago. So we had like many fields that weren't necessary, or they were just like quite redundant being there, just kind of in the way of my publishing process at the end of the day. So I think what like the great impact or improvement that Prativa and Özgür they did here was really to proactively listen to each editor in terms of what we really need and what we want to display on the pages. So like we sat down and discussed with them. So from there, Prativa designed the mock-ups of each page of each template, and as things are settled down, Özgür would take it from there and create the content models. And as a result, it's just that our publishing process are way more straightforward. So, like many redundant fields are removed. And maybe I can show one example here, which is exactly what Angie was mentioning. So I kind of went down the memory lane today and figured that, like we used to publish resources and events using the same content model. But what that means to us was that, let's take a look at, sorry, I'm actually on blog posts. So I'm going to resources. So we had a page model called resources and events. So what it means to us is that, we had this field, for example, speakers. But what that means is that I would be publishing ebook, reports, webinars, events using the same page model. And the speakers could mean the authors of an ebook, the panelists of webinar, and also the participants of an event. So that's just like a mix like of everything that's kind of like, or many concepts were mingled together. But if we take a look at how it looks like now, by the way, I'm going to the new Hygraph studio. This is how it looks like on the event. So everything's super clean, straightforward. Yeah, and I'm done with the example here. But what I'm trying to say is that, as far as I know, like very recently, we had a person who was doing her internship with us, and she was helping putting content entries. And it didn't take her more than 30 minutes to figure out where she wants to put what. And for me, I think what I use like most frequently is the blog page model, and it takes me always less than 10 minutes. And the other thing is that you have all of the template figured out, and yeah, you just go very straightforward, as in like you know what you want to publish. But on the other hand, if I want to show something different visually on our blog post, I just use those inline components that Prativa showed.
Nice. And as kind of a shift here, like Jing, you mentioned, Prativa and Özgür kind of like took feedback and worked on the content models. And Özgür, can you talk a little bit about, we started with a website, so we didn't have to start from scratch, right? We had some of these content models, but how did you work through going through those content models and making the new ones that we've got today?
Yeah. I mean, we were a little bit lucky because we didn't really start from scratch. We had an existing website, so we didn't really do a lot of content modeling because it was also already there. But we did a lot of schema design because, like I said at the beginning, we wanted to use Hygraph components. By the way, Hygraph components are great for design systems as well. And maybe we shouldn't go into much into the process of schema design here, but basically it's the same process as you are doing a database design. And in the CMS, in Hygraph, you are mostly deciding the shape of the data you want to fetch. And also the beauty of Hygraph is that it has a native GraphQL API. So even if you make some mistakes, even if you don't have the same data you want in the same, in the same model, you can just merge them like with some GraphQL techniques, and you can just fetch the whole data you need at one shot. So I think this is a very convenient way of fetching data, and like, you know, it gives you a lot of flexibility when you're designing your schema. I think one of the things that we needed to do a lot was to migrate the old content, and we had to move a lot of the content from the old schema to this new schema. So Hygraph also gives you a lot of tools to do that, but it's also quite easy to write your own migration scripts if you want to. So yeah, the process was mostly like that, I guess.
Nice. So yeah, and kind of as a follow-up there too, with the idea of the collaboration and figuring things out, Pratibha, when you're working on this design system, like not on the website itself, how do you work with the design team, with the development team, and with content writers, and how do their contributions evolve our design system?
Right. So yeah, there's also the important point that this is a living system, so nothing is set in stone. Like we launched the first iteration of the website with this system last year in July, and since then itself we've changed some of the pages already, because we sometimes realize that something is not serving our long-term goals as a company from the more business front, so we have to redo some things. And in those moments, like we redid our blog index a couple months ago, and at that time it was more of me starting with Jing and Dino, our head of demand gen, to understand what our needs are for the blog index, or what our struggles are. So we try to map those things out and see what can be some good examples, also try to take some inspiration here and there, and try to create like basic wireframe, see how it aligns with the design language that we want to use, and how everything sort of comes together. And then once I create like the basic draft, then I pass it on to the developers, and then we see how it also syncs with the code. So that's how the process generally goes, that whenever we have a new page to do, we go a lot of back and forth to understand what the new requirements are, if anything changes, and that's how we go. But a lot of times, like, we've had to change our color palette as well since we launched the system, which is a big change, and it affects the code as well, because these are more foundational things, so we have to change them everywhere. And yeah, it's more about us understanding and collaborating very nicely and talking to each other often to understand if there are any blockers, because we want this to be helping people, not blocking them. And that's basically about it.
Nice. And I think that's a decent segue to talk a little bit about some of the technical aspects too. So Özgür and also Gabrielle a little bit here. We chose Tailwind CSS for kind of the CSS framework that we're utilizing here. And Pratibha mentioned like new color palette and stuff like that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about why we chose Tailwind and what are the technical advantages there, but also how does that kind of go toward the foundational goal that we had of this maintainability and scalability there.
If you want, I can start because I am the person who mostly decided to use Tailwind. First of all, it's not really about Tailwind. Like, you can do this with any other CSS solution. You can even write vanilla CSS, and actually I really like vanilla CSS, and sometimes I prefer to do that as well. But Tailwind is like, it's a very common nowadays. Every front-end developer knows how to use it. And so you should be picking something that you can leave to the other developers, right? So it's not something that you will be working on only. So that was the main, I think, reasoning about choosing Tailwind. It's because it was quite common. And also, I have noticed that it was super easy to customize Tailwind. You could write a complete preset from scratch, and that means that, like, instead of like classical or typical Tailwind class names, like let's take a color class name, for example, like BG Blue 500, you can you can easily add your own token name to it. So maybe you have a token name BG primary, BG success, etc., or BG primary hover. So it was very easy to introduce this into Tailwind and create a Tailwind preset and share this among projects. So I think that was the main reason we picked Tailwind, because of its customizability possibilities. And what do you think, Gabriel?
Well, I'm not a big fan of Tailwind, so I'll start with that. But I also think that for this particular use case, it's a very good solution, because the Tailwind provides you with some restrictions in order to maintain this consistency between things like what you just mentioned about the tokens there. And I think that for those sort of situations, which are most of the time like the common thing, I think they work pretty well. But sometimes, I mean, if I need to do something a little bit more custom or a little bit more complex, I think the boilerplate that I need to write with Tailwind, it's a little bit too much, and it becomes very less legible, I'd say. So did you have to do some sort of complex animations with it, or something more that required more complex classes, for example?
Sounds like that was a follow-up question there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, can you repeat the question again? Like,
yeah, like usually, I mean, for the regular things that you do, you just use some classes. For example, I don't know, text H2 or the colors with the tokens that you mentioned. But maybe you need to do something kind of complex with an animation that has multiple steps, or for example, I don't know, a gradient that has some specific breakpoints, and the classes become a little bit more complex. Did you have to do those sort of things while creating the base part of the design system and the code base? Or
yeah, we did. Like, actually, we did some animations using Tailwind, and there is I mean, in the Tailwind config, you can add your own animations with keyframes, etc. So it allows you to add really complex stuff as well. But I agree, at times it can be cryptic, especially if you are using what is it called, this arbitrary class syntax. It can look a little bit cryptic.
Yeah, the
And
ones
so
between the brackets, you mean, right?
Yeah, I think exactly. I think it's a trade-off. Like, it gives you a lot of good things. Of course, like in many things, there are pros and cons. I think maybe this is the disadvantage, or like or negative side of Tailwind.
And I just want to mention real fast that we have 3 relatively senior front-end folks here today, Gabriel, Özgür, and myself. And honestly, I think we all have a similar opinion on Tailwind. Like, useful, but also I just like vanilla CSS. Like, let's just go with that sometimes. But I think it's interesting that the 3 of us all kind of have a very similar opinion there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, I personally like vanilla CSS a lot as well.
Gabriel, I want to follow up a little bit with you on this too, and talk a little bit about, I should be me up first, talk a little bit about how you inherited this system, right? Like, theoretically, the maintainability and the scalability of this, that's the drive behind the design system and the component system. How was it inheriting this system, and how do you work on it going forward for improvements as well?
Well, it was really good, actually. Like, as soon as I joined, I had a bunch of meetings with Özgür. He taught me a lot about the design system, how they structure things, all these things that Prativa was mentioning regarding components, blocks, the design tokens as well. So everything felt very, very well structured. So for me, moving on into this, it was nice. Some things I had to adapt to were more of the way things were being done moving forward. Like, I needed to do things the same way that they were being done elsewhere in other components, for example. So this way we could also expose the same naming for things towards the editors, because I don't know, if we are using, for example, slug in some models and then we use URL in some others, maybe there's some sort of confusion. There's also a lack of consistency when writing the code. So I needed to like properly understand how to name things, and also which things should be exposed towards the editors, because most of the time you have some these page templates that we're using, but sometimes you need to do some custom things because there are some pages that are a little bit more custom. So you need a way, like escape hatch for you as a developer to be able to edit those things. So having these escape hatches with CSS classes, for example, is really good for you to be able to edit those things, but then you don't expose those towards the editors in Hygraph. So the editors can only choose between, let's say, I don't know, 3 variants of a text. And like, I can also use those 3 variants, but I can also override the text with my custom things. So that's a really interesting thing that I had to take into account. Like, what should I expose and what should I keep secret for me to use?
As a quick follow-up on that, because I think that's a really important thing to talk about, right? The idea that we need to give a lot of control to editors and we need to give a lot of that control out, but how do you decide where that line is? Because you can go really far in the modular component system and give every piece of access, but then sometimes you get what I used to in agency life call Frankenstein designs out of that. You get things pieced together maybe too much. How do you decide where the slider should be on that between control and flexibility?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was going to quote also Frankenstein designs, because like if we give too much flexibility, then the editors can do whatever and pages can look like a Christmas tree with all the flashy lights over there. So we need to have some control over there, and that's where Prativa stands forward and says, yeah, we limit at this point. And then I have to understand what she means, like, let's give up to this level of flexibility towards the editors, and then I have to code things so that they don't have access to the other levels of flexibility. Sometimes it's about theming, sometimes it's about variants, for example, the dark mode variants and those sort of things. But I mean, there's a bunch of different ways of differentiating these sort of blocks. Like I said, variants and theming. For example, let's talk about a hero block. There are variants like the horizontal and the vertical block, but there's also theming like the dark mode and I don't know, some primary title or something like that. So we structure a group of changes under under a theme, and we release those towards the user.
And I guess Pratibha, as a follow-up to that, right? Like as kind of, I guess, the person that oversees the design aspect of these systems, I guess, where do you draw the line and how do you make that decision?
So again, it also comes to a lot of back and forth. Like there are times when someone from the team wants to build a new landing page, which is really important to them, and they say that no, your components are really limiting me, because some days as a designer I also have to be strict, like no, 3 lines of text does not look good here, can you write something in 2 lines please, which is also difficult because I know these people also have a particular rationale behind that. And that is a place where we sort of have to see what is actually possible, if it's important enough that we should make a change or there are no compromises possible. So then we do create some new, if it's needed, then we can just settle with a new variant, or we say try to create a new hero component, or like the heroes that I was showing, the ones towards the bottom, they are new components. And those were created very recently because we realized we needed to show some badges or some forms inside the hero, which is not a capability that we had earlier. So yeah, sometimes it can be a little difficult conversation, a lot of back and forth, but as long as we are collaborating well and communicating often and trying to understand each other's needs and what's possible as well, because we want to make sure the messaging is right, but at the same time the design doesn't get affected too much as well, because especially on a, like, this is also where I personally feel that a product design system and a marketing design system varies a lot, because in marketing you have to give them so much flexibility that you will design the section header to fit 2 lines, but sometimes they might add in more copy and it can get to 3-4 lines. So how do you make sure it still looks good? So there's a lot of like testing involved, and yeah, sometimes we have to tell them, hey, we need to cut this down, please.
You get to tell me and Angie that a lot, because the names on these streams, we're putting like 4 brands together and like 3 technology. It's a struggle. But also when you think about it, outside the design, sometimes those titles are a little long just to be titles anyway. So
yeah.
Let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about editing experience a little bit more. Jing, I'm kind of curious overall. We're all creatives, right? In our own ways. We've got design creative, we've got code creative, and we have content creative. How do these systems work together for you to allow for creativity in the campaigns that you make, the pages you create, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. Previously, I've covered like how it works with the templatized pages, right? Because we use templates for blog posts, event pages, partner pages, and many other types of content. But yeah, I can also touch a little bit upon the modular pages that you guys were mainly mentioning, because that's something new to us, and especially I think that's something kind of innovative with this design system, new design system in place, let's say, because yeah, we've never worked with such thing before. And essentially the modular pages, they were created for more specific content, for like landing pages and so on, right? So what it means is that how we used to do things, if I wanted to create a landing page on, the best headless CMS, then I would kind of write the copy on a Google Doc and then draw some rough layout on Google Doc and just hand it over to the developer and the designer. It means that I'm done from here. They just need to deliver the page. But it also means very little scalability, because like everything is kind of like made in one go, and you can never reuse any components that you've created, or like things were quite in silo, in my opinion, and that's not how I would like content to be connected. And now, so one thing is what I don't know if the audience follower called the Figma file that the Prativa showed. So basically, when you think of creating a new landing page, this modular page kind of forced us or enabled us to think systematically. Like, hey, I want card grid on my landing page, but I don't want it for only one use. Like, we all like recycling is the trend in the end, for like every aspect. And you need to think that I want to use those card grids for the future as well. So it's really great to know which components we have available in the system. And I think, yeah, like Bryan, you can pull up my browser quickly here. This is the example. I've also showed it in the part 5 of our blog series. So basically, like it kind of looks very abstract from at the first glance, let's say. However, this is all of the flexibility that I'm talking about here. So you can choose from a variety of components here, and you can drag and drop, like arrange them differently, whether I want, let's say, the hero section, then I want maybe the G2 badges, and then you have so many things to choose from in the end. But like, it's something that we've mentioned repeatedly. Maybe we can, we don't need to show that page anymore. It's something that we've mentioned repeatedly, is that, it's using this kind of modular page or like design system. It's a paradigm shift for sure, for especially non-technical users like me or like many other of our editors. It doesn't look as attractive as a drag and drop page builder. It just doesn't look visual enough. However, it's the time that I'm saving on like not overspending time in thinking like every little design detail, because that's simply not my job. And what kind of going back to the quote that Gabriel mentioned here, sometimes it's like as an editor, I didn't want to create a Christmas tree. I was only aiming for the Christmas present, but you only lose so much time and focus when you have too many options. But here with this design system, you don't have to think of all those details anymore. You just purely focus on content, and it's what matters to us in the end.
Excellent. Let me go back to my list. I want to make sure I want to mention, if you're listening in chat, feel free to ask any questions you've got. And I am going to give a quick plug to the fact that later on, if you have questions, most of us exist within the Slack community for Hygraph. So if you do have any questions for the panel today that you didn't think to ask, or maybe you're watching this on YouTube later on, come on by slack.hygraph.com. We're all hanging out there. So be sure to ask the questions there as well. So I guess now we got about 15 minutes. I feel like we can start wrapping up a little bit. And I'd love to give a moment for the panel to have any kind of parting shots or any other like little nuggets of wisdom that you want to share with the community around doing either design systems or modular content or anything else around that. So what do y'all think about little nuggets of wisdom?
I can tell something about what this what we gained from this. I think the most important thing that we gained from this is that we don't really hard code anything in the website. Like in my experience, I've seen a lot of website hard coding content. So even if you want to change a single, word, or maybe just want to add a comma, you need a developer, right? So developer needs to come in, like make a pull request and publish it again, etc., etc. But for us, we don't hard code almost anything. I think only on the homepage we do this kind of stuff, right? Gabriel, maybe you can tell something about that. Other than that, as far as I know, we don't really do any hard coding.
Yes, of course. Can you repeat a little bit that last part? Sorry.
Yeah. I was talking about that we don't really hard code any content. All the content is coming from the CMS, but we have an exception only for the homepage, because we want our homepage to be more, flashy, good, and Pratibha is doing good designs. Like she wants to be a little bit more, freestyle. So we give her this flexibility there, I guess.
Yes. So that's a little bit of a hustle sometimes, because since everything is so structured and so consistent, when I go do something more custom, like the homepage, for example, I see a title that looks like this is going to be a feature section, so I want to plug in the feature section straight away, even though I know it's something custom. But I see that everything matches. Like the text is something that's a header from a feature section, for example. So why not use a feature section directly? And then I realized that maybe the line height, instead of being 30, it's 32 or something like that. And Pratibha's eagle eyes are amazing, and that. So I mean, I consider myself quite good at detecting those things, but my God, Pratibha's eyes are incredibly good at that. So every minor pixel, even though, like, I don't know, 1% letter spacing she finds there. So that's pretty amazing, and it helped me quite a bunch while developing those sort of pages to have her over there. But while building these sort of things, on one side, it's also really good because we are doing way more custom stuff, way more animation related stuff. So everything looks really, really cool, and it's not like your typical landing page with I don't know, that you can build with Webflow or some auto-generating tool, but like it's something really custom, and I love creating those sort of things. But it ends up generating a lot of Tailwind styles, like we talked about earlier, with the brackets and the custom styling, which makes everything a little bit less readable, but more ugly too. Like to have to maintain those sort of specific cases and repeat, I don't know, the specific line height that I was talking about in multiple parts of the page. So sometimes what I try to do is, can we maybe include this into the design system? And we ended up doing that at some point, because, for example, with the sections, the spacing between each of the sections, we had a pretty limited amount. I think we had 2 variants, and now we had 4. this was because we started using way more bigger and smaller variants. So yeah, I talked with Pratita and we decided to include them in case we needed them further down in some other page. So yeah, that was pretty helpful as well to have this opportunity to like experiment new things and see if more spacing was better, for example.
Yeah, I guess other parting shots. What else does anyone else want to share about this process and this system?
Yeah, I was just thinking that actually connecting to that, I would like to also re-emphasize that a design system is not something that you built once and then forget about it. It's like you have to still keep thinking about it every day. It's just that it reduces some overhead, so you don't have to do the basic things again and again, but you still need to keep innovating, keep making sure that it's adapting to everyone's needs and new needs even. But having a system like this also makes things faster in a way that tomorrow, if you want to introduce a new font, which I did a couple months ago, and I annoyed all the developers for that, but it was much faster because we didn't have to go and change every single component. We could just change it at the base level. And it was even easier because I wanted to see 5 different previews for what would the different variations of the same font look like, and they could help me with that within just a few clicks. So having this whole setup also makes things faster. And also in general, as a designer, I have to be less worried sometimes about new assets, because if you give people full freedom, then they can put any color, any font, anything, and then I, like, as the person responsible for the brand design, it would hurt the brand sentiments as well. So it's easier for me now that there are some limits set to the whole process, and I know that whatever goes out won't be too far beyond what we want the brand to look like.
Amazing. And then I want to make sure Jing and Angie, any parting shots from the two of you?
Yeah. I think as a content person here is that many times we, like as what Prativa said, maybe you have like just too many options to look at, right? So if you work in content or marketing and you realize that you're not really spending time on your core job, which is the content or the marketing, but instead, discussing with developers, like go kind of annoying developers, or like talking way too many details with the designers, then you probably need to rethink the system that you're using, because it might not be the right one. It might just be like, driving you away from doing your core job, which is not, like in my case, like which is not something that you really enjoy doing every day. And that's like, on the other hand, it's also not what you're hired for.
Nice. And Angie, what kind of last shots?
I would say life as a marketer can be really easy to edit content. If you have to do it once, you have to sit with your developer and designer and discuss about the components that you need, the content that you need, and build those content models together. You have to build those templates, and after that, you can build pages every single day independently, edit that content very easily, very fast. And so just get together once, do that collaboration, and then you'll be independent. You can do your day-to-day tasks very easily, very fast, very efficiently.
Nice. And Gabrielle, I realized you just kind of tacked on to Özgür. So what's your parting shot for the day today?
Well, I have 3 things I wanted to mention, actually. So first of all, regarding responsive design, responsive is very important for all of you. So please, a good thing to do is to consider them inside of the components. That helped me a lot when developing the sites, because everything, all the components that were already created had already the responsiveness in them. So everything was way more straightforward to build. I had to consider those in the customly built pages, but having the responsiveness embedded into your components, especially now that we have container queries in CSS as well, it's something really good to take into account. Also, for me, something that I'm really happy about working in this sort of website is that the amount of traffic it gets, it's quite high. So every little change I make has a ton of difference in the, I don't know, the cache rights and the the amount of visits that we get, the SEO. So always, I need to always be mindful of these sort of things and to check the metrics that, for example, in our case, Vercel gives us, like the amount of cache that we are using, the amount of revalidations. Use, for example, instead of time-based revalidations, try to use the proactive revalidations based on changes with the webhooks in Hygraph. That's also something quite important. And last but not least, the communication. I mean, working with Prativa all day in building these sort of things, it's all about communication in the end, like going back and forth, showing her the preview links that we get from Vercel. Those are very important, and also checking what you're doing constantly to get the best version out there is extremely important, because I mean, in the end, what this website is for, apart from bringing content for everyone, it's for it to look good and expose the brand as best as possible. So yeah, those are my 3 takes.
Amazing. Good 3 parting shots there. I do want to mention a couple other things as we close this down. First and foremost, as I said before, all these amazing folks that were here today for us, they do exist in real life, but they exist in our Slack channel as well. So go to slack.hygraph.com, ask any questions you have there. I also want to make sure that we mention that this is actually a blog post that we or a blog series. I'm sorry, not a single blog post, a whole series of articles that we wrote about all of this. Each of the people represented over here had some say in all of that, and wrote up some amazing things there. It's a long URL. Head over to hygraph.com, go to the blog. You'll find the articles there as well. And yeah, thank you so much to this amazing panel for not just being here today, but for making this amazing design system as well, because I get to use it sometimes and it does make my life way easier as well. So thank you all so much. I'll see you in our Slack, but also in the community Slack as well. Thanks a lot.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.